Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be a very long presentation. I will try myself best to get through it, but it will be quite long because I'll be going through a lot of the regulations with you. But never mind, here we are. So as of the 15th of January 2026, the new variation regulation came into force, and I just wanted to give you some of my opinions and flavors of with regards to this update. So these are the things that I'm going to cover in this presentation, this very long presentation. So the scope of this presentation, I'm actually trying to reduce this scope down to a bare minimum, but it turned out to be quite a long presentation. So the scope, I'll give an introduction, and then I will talk about the delegated regulation. So the first one, the delegated regulation 2021/756, and that was relating to the coronavirus. And then the second delegated regulation 2024/1701, that related to the efficiency and update and also applications of annual updates, if you like, to coronavirus as we do for influenza virus and also for other potential viruses that could occur in a human pandemic. Then I've got variation categories. So this is a refresh. And then I'm going to talk about the amendment to the guideline document. Oh, I don't know whether or not I think I have. And then I'm going to just talk about the regulations and Annex III. So this is basically looking at the delegated regulations and how it has updated and impacted on the regulation, and then just giving a quick overview of Annex III. I'll be talking about supergrouping, grouping, and work sharing. I'll be talking about the actual category presentation of the categories in the variation guideline document and what the changes are. I'll talk about the administrative changes. I might take that out depending on how long this video is. I guess you can always cut the video down or look to whatever section you're interested in. Section Q will be the quality changes. I'm not going to go through all of the quality changes, but I am going to talk about the code changes, the new categories that have been included. I want to talk about design space, master files, and vaccines. And design space and vaccines, really, they're kind of, I don't know, I guess they're really scientific in nature, CMC in nature. And then I want to just give my own opinion on the digitalisation and the use of AI in the direction where I feel that we're going. So this presentation basically relates to the updates for the variation regulations and what it means in terms of classification and submission for post-approval activities. So these are the delegated regulations. Yeah, they're delegated regulations. They're just a tool that the European Commission uses to update of regulation. So the regulation, the variation regulation EU number 1234/2008, yeah, that's the regulation, and the tool that they use, that the European Commission uses to update them, yeah, is these delegated regulations. And it's just to make sure that everything is kept agile. And without them, you wouldn't be able to update the variations. Sorry, to update the regulation, you'd have a regulation that's set in stone and antiquated. Yeah. So when we want to move in time with regards to new technologies like messenger RNA and CRISPR-Cas9, say, we want to be able to update the regulation so that it keeps up to pace. Is that the word I'm thinking about? It keeps up to speed, if you like, with science, technology, and where medicines are going. And also, it incorporates the expertise that the industry has and that the regulators have. So basically, these delegated regulations, once they're passed, it's now binding in their entirety, and it means that the variation regulation has been amended in line with those regulations, and then where necessary it's transposed into national law. So for example, for where it impacts on national licenses, Directive 2001/83 EC, I think off the top of my head, then it can be transposed directly into national law. So these delegations that I'm going to be talking about, they are there to amend the regulations, and that's the scope of this conversation, to talk about the delegated regulations, how they've been used to update the variation regulation, how the variation guidelines and the categories have been updated as a result of that, and just go through that. And just, yeah, I'm going to be talking about the subsequent changes to the variation regulation. So this revised EMA variation regulation came into effect on the 15th of January 2026. And that was the aim. The aim was to streamline the process for marketing authorization to implement changes to their medicinal products. Yes, that's what I'm going to be doing. I will be discussing the delegated regulations that amend the variation regulation. I'll be providing some hints and tips with regards to looking at the variation guidelines and where to find what. The focus really is on CMC. I made this slide at first before I made the alterations, and I said I may touch on safety and efficacy. I think I haven't really, and I might do that on another presentation. But the focus really is on the CMC, although I will make some touch points on safety and efficacy where required, but I don't think I did. Right, let's talk about this first one, the Commission Delegated Regulation EU 2021/756. So this was on the 24th of March 2021. So this amended the regulation, the variation regulation, as I said, number 123 for 2008. Yeah, so that was what it amended. At that time, that variation was variation to the terms of marketing authorization for medicinal products for human use and veterinary medicinal products. So at that time, this was what it was amending. Yeah. Basically, if you look at the delegated regulation, and I will go through that, you will see that it's giving you an explanation as to why this delegated regulation wasn't required, and that was the public health emergency of international concern as declared by the World Health Organization. That's the reason. And the fact that public health emergency was characterized as a pandemic. Yeah. And also, well, this is the reason, the need to, and I've quoted this directly from the delegation, to ensure the continued effectiveness of authorized COVID-19 vaccines. It may be necessary to modify them in a way that involves changing their composition so as to protect against new or multiple variant strains in the context of the pandemic or otherwise. So they want to give that framework that is required to adapt the medicine in order to address the modifications of the virus, the viral strain that occurs as a normal part of genetic mutation. And basically, this regulation, this delegated regulation, defined the regulated procedure for this as a type 2 variation. This is the other regulation, delegated regulation 2024/1701 of as of March 2024. And this delegated regulation, as I said, it amended the regulation, the variation regulation 1234/2008, yeah, relating to the examination of variations to the terms of the marketing authorization, specifically for human use. And I will talk about that. So as I said, the original regulation stated that, these regulations should be adjusted, without departing from, the general principles, yeah. And this is as a result of that. So as a result of updating the regulations to account for science and technology, risk-based approaches, human pandemics, that's the reason for the update. So this update relates to, and I've taken this directly from the regulation, practical experience in the application of that regulation, i.e. 1234/2008, and yeah, basically to streamline it, to provide a simple, clear, flexible legal framework while at the same time guaranteeing public health protection. Yeah. So these are just taken directly from the delegation, and this is basically the reason. They want to achieve efficiency. They want to reduce administrative burdens for pharmaceutical industry and to better use the resources of competent authorities. And therefore, this streamline and simplification has resulted in changes to the regulation and the guidelines, but it does ensure the same standards for quality, safety, and efficacy of medicines. And again, this is something that's important and has actually been adopted in this particular regulation, in that they have they've taken account of scientific and technical progress, and they've basically streamlined variation classifications, the procedure for variation. So this is where they've done the super grouping, I believe they're talking about here. So for this purpose, the agency shall provide an annual recommendation on unforeseen variation. So no, that's something else. So they're just going to basically annually update their recommendations with regards to unforeseen variations. That's Article 5. Yeah. And that's to take into consideration the scientific and technical progress. They've introduced a super grouping concept for variations. They've defined the work sharing procedures into the regulation and also into the variation guidelines, I believe. Well, they certainly described it. Yes, and the other thing that they've done is, because of the fact that there has been advances in science and technologies for decades and experience with regards to manufacture of biological medicinal products, they can take a risk-based approach, a scientific risk-based approach. And therefore, before, the default was to submit variations with regards to these products. The default was to apply a type 2 variation. Where applicable, a type 1b variation can now be adopted. So they basically adapted the approach of classifying some of the quality changes that relate to ATMPs and biological medicines, to not go from the type 2 to a type 1b, because we have experience, we have expertise, and we have a history and a build up of data to suggest that it's not necessary and that we can take that type 1b approach, therefore refining the variation regulation appropriately and making it simplified and streamlined. And then, yes, they decided to use the strain updates regulatory framework for the COVID-19 strain updates. That approach is now going to be applied to other vaccines, particularly those where there is a public health emergency. And again, they've applied the regulatory framework for influenza vaccines. So, this annual update, every year the flu vaccine, the flu jab changes accordingly. They've applied that approach and that framework to coronavirus, or the COVID-19. And the other thing that they've done is they've introduced and they've formalized the life cycle management strategy. So the design space, and that will be where you're formalizing your established conditions, and the post-approval change management protocols. They've separated it out for the active substance and the drug substance. They just made it a bit more clearer. So they've just formalized that introduction of those life cycle strategies, aligning it to the ICH guidelines for post-approval change management and for post-approval life cycle activities. And they've also introduced a separate quality section for medical devices. These are where the medical devices are like part of the pharmaceutical products, and they are assessed alongside the actual drug product, so they're not treated separately. So for example, like pre-filled syringes, so they've just had a separate they've just basically made it more clearer for people to understand what category to choose. And they've also introduced a new M section. So this is the master file holders. So any changes that will be made to the plasma master file or the vaccine antigen master file can be adopted that way. Obviously, there are changes that can be made to the vaccine, sorry, the what's it called? Vaccine antigen master file. My brain's gone dead, and the plasma master file. Um, these quality changes will come under the Q section of the quality section of the dossier, but any certain updates that only relate to master file holders, they've separated it out, just made it simple, clear to understand. And the last but by no means least, they've taken out the veterinary products, and it's only applicable to this regulation is now only applicable to human medicinal products. Right, let's just have a quick recap. Yeah, these are the type of variations that are still applicable. So you've got type 1As. These are minor variations, must be notified within 12 months. Type 1A, immediate notifications. They're minor variations, but they must be notified within 14 days. Type 1Bs are also minor notifications. I think it's 30 days review before implementation, tacit implementation. And type 2s, these are major variations that can potentially relate to changes that affect the quality, safety, efficacy, and they require full assessment before implementation. Right, let's talk about the guideline document because there have been some updates there. So they've introduced the concept of supergrouping, and it's explained in the variation guideline documents. You can only submit type 1A's immediate notification. I don't think you should submit type 1A's immediate notification. Apologies, that's a mistake there. It's applicable to type 1A variations. I don't know whether you can sneak in a type 1A immediate notification only if the implementation date is going to be within 2 weeks, but I don't think you could. Apologies, there's a mistake there. So it should only be applicable to type 1A variations and not type 1A immediate notification. The implementation date must always be respected. These variations can all be submitted at once in one application, so that's improvement in efficiency. Like grouping is clarified. So you can type 1Bs and type 2s, how to group them, and when you can group across MAs. So for purely national procedures, you can group across MAs, but for decentralized procedures, mutual recognition procedures, and centralized procedures, you have to submit them as a work sharing. Work sharing, clarified what work sharing is. And basically the changes in the format, the changes in the way that the guideline has been presented. So you've got E for administrative changes, Q for quality changes, C for clinical changes. So that includes like safety, pharmacovigilance, and something else that I can't remember at the moment, efficacy, and M for your master file. And then they've also introduced the lifecycle management procedure. So this is for your design space introduction, post-approval change management protocols, and they've separated it out for active substances and finished products. So let's talk about the regulations and let's talk about Annex 3. Hello, and thank you for joining me. This is just a quick overview of the variation regulation, and I just want to talk about, in this particular slide, I want to talk about the delegated regulations. So these delegated regulations are the tools that the European Commission uses to update the regulation, and the regulation that we are updating is the EC number 1234 2008. So this is the variation regulation. So I just want to go through the last two delegated regulations. So this first one that we've already discussed, I just want to go through it so that you can see exactly what has happened. So this is the delegated regulation, and its number is 2021-756 of March 2021. So what was the purpose of this regulation? So the purpose, as I previously described, is to update the regulatory framework to take into consideration changes to the virus, the coronavirus. So um, the fact of the matter that I think this is, yeah, sorry. So it's applicable to these licenses, to these procedures. It's applicable to the Directive 2001/83 EC, and that's for national procedures, and also to Regulation 726 2004, that's for centralized procedures. And basically, it's an acknowledgement of the public health emergency. So the World Health Organization declared the outbreak of COVID-19 a public health emergency. And then on the 11th of March 2020, it was characterized as a pandemic. Yeah. And so as a result of that, the fact that they had to roll out the vaccine, so they had the marketing authorizations approved, and they rolled out the vaccines as an as it was unprecedented public health emergency, as as to be expected, um, mutations arose. So here mutations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus are a natural phenomenon and to be expected. Yeah. And authorized vaccines are not necessarily less effective against mutations, but there is a risk that they may be. So therefore, there would be a requirement to update the strain. Yeah. And so in order to ensure the continued effectiveness of the authorized COVID-19 vaccine, it may be necessary to modify them in ways that involve changing their composition. So to protect against new or multiple variant strains in the context of a pandemic or otherwise. So that's the reason, and that's the background that we know it's a natural phenomenon for viruses to mutate, their genetic material to mutate. Yeah. And once they do mutate, the amino acids that are produced on the spike, or maybe the messenger RNA that's going to be producing the protein that is going to be, causing that immune protection in some medicines, yeah, is not going to may not be as effective. There may be a requirement to update it and to change the composition in accordance with the mutated virus. And these changes um, involves replacement or addition of the serotype, strain, or antigen, or a combination of serotype, strains, or antigens. And these are to be considered as a variation. Yeah. So when we're talking about vaccines and we're talking about changing the protein and changing the nucleic sequence, it's not the same approach as, say, for example, an advanced therapy medicinal product. It's a different approach, because it's a vaccine, it's an infectious agent, and we want to deal with it in a different way. And the most appropriate way we adjust the regulations so that it benefits the people and it's not about bureaucracy, is to ensure that these are treated and considered to be a variation to the marketing authorization, because overall we don't expect the safety and efficacy to be significantly different, although it may very well be, and we continue with the pharmacovigilance capture of data. We will obviously ensure that we conduct some bridging studies, to understand the immuno profile, and the platform technology is going to be the same. So the manufacturing is going to be the same. The technology that's used to develop the drug, the product is very I would say doesn't vary that much. It's not, the technology is not significantly different. It's a platform technology, and therefore we can apply the same approaches and minimize the time frames and the procedure so that we can address this emergency, this public health emergency. Yeah, and so that's why they've updated the regulation, and the provisions of such variation should be streamlined during the pandemic. Yeah, so that means that in line with approaches taken with human influenza, it should follow an accelerated timetable. Yeah, so they've just clarified that. Um, if the competent authority does request additional data in the course of their assessment, they should not be required to take a decision until the assessment of that data has been finalised, just to give them that safety net. Um, and during pandemic, it may be of in the interest of the public health to process variations on the basis of less comprehensive data than is normally the case. Yeah. However, this approach should be subject to a requirement that the data be complemented and complemented subsequently, i.e., follow up data, and with a view of confirming the benefit risk balance still remains favourable. And what they have done is they have updated the regulation. So, Article 21 has been replaced to um, to account for this update, and Article 23A has been added, and this is relating to variations. So there's going to be an additional variation here re- related to changes to the active substance of a human coronavirus, including replacement or addition of a serotype, strain, antigen, or coding sequence, or a combination of serotype, strains, antigens, or coding sequence. Yeah. And also Annex 1, point C of Annex 1 has been replaced with this, and it basically amounts to the same thing with regards to coronavirus and with regards to um, replacing or additional serotype, strain, antigen, or coding sequence, or a combination of all of those things. Um, so all of these things have been, these are the, and I point to Annex 2, again, has been amended. So they've amended the regulation, the variation regulation, to take this into account. So variations related to the replacement or addition of a serotype, strain, antigen, or coding sequence, or combination of serotype, strain, antigens, or coding sequence for human antigens. Yeah, yeah. And so that's the first delegation regulation. So let's go back to the variation regulation, and let's look at the last one, which is this one. So this variation regulation, as I've said in my slide presentation, is the one where we have done the learning, and we've harmonized, and we've made the improvements based upon experience. Yeah. So um, regarding it just regards the examination of variations to the terms of the marketing authorization, and it relates to these directives and regulations. So the directive for 2001/83 EC relates to national procedures, and the regulation 726/2004 relates to centralized procedures. Yeah. And this is the justification for it, and that is that practical experience, practical in light of practical experience, they've decided to review this regulation and make it more simpler, clearer, and flexible. Yeah. So, and as per the requirement of the regulation, it should be adjusted without departing from general principles on which these procedures are laid or based. And this is the reason for efficiency gains, to reduce administrative burdens for the pharmaceutical industry and the regulators and the competent authorities. So it's been streamlined and simplified. It's been updated to take into account scientific and technical progress. They've introduced super grouping. Here it is here. So they've talked about grouping and they've talked about work sharing as well. Work sharing, I can't off the top of my head recall if it was actually integrated into the regulation. I do know that the CMDH has a guideline with regards to work sharing, and it's something that we've been doing. But I don't know whether or not it was actually integrated. I can't recall. I haven't done one for a while, into the actual regulation. But in any case, now it is. Yeah. So now it is there. And we have this work sharing procedure as well as supergrouping only applicable to type 1A variations. Um, it's also been updated to take into account advances in science with regards to biological medicinal products. So these include biotechnology products and advanced therapy medicinal products. So basically, in the past, those variations or those changes, quality changes, by default were type 2 variations. And what they've decided is based upon science, technologies, and decades of experience in the manufacture of this, the default will not always be a major type 2 variation. Sometimes you will have a type 1B variations. And this includes advanced therapies. Um, yeah, again, they've made some updates with regards to COVID-19 adaptations to ensure the continued effectiveness as a result of multiple strain. And they've taken the same approach for coronavirus vaccines as they did with as they do with human influenza. So this relates to annual updates. So you know, as each year the flu jab, the vaccine, influenza vaccine is updated and amended in order to account for the change in the virus, yeah, the genetic drift or the mutation, whatever. And the this is done on an annual basis, and now this approach is being taken with coronavirus. So they've updated the variation in line with that. And the other thing that they've done is they've introduced the concepts that were discussed in the ICH guidelines for post approval. So this relates to things like design space, post approval change management protocol. They've sort of clarified it and made it simpler in terms of how to do it. And what was it? There was the other thing, design space, post approval life cycle. I think that was it. So they've incorporated, I think it's ICH 14 and ICH 9 or 12, I can't remember. So they basically incorporated you know, the post approval life cycle approaches and allowed the applicant to register these design space and establish conditions and you know, post approval life cycle management systems, etc., and their control strategy, etc., and to update it as appropriate. And this is in line with where we're moving in terms of ICHM4Q. The other thing that they've done is that they've removed the veterinary medicinal products, veterinary medicinal products from the regulation. So is no longer is to no longer apply to veterinary medicinal products. So any reference to veterinary medicinal products will be removed from the regulation, and that will be that will be covered, accounted for, or addressed in some other regulations specific to veterinary products. And therefore, it's all been amended. And so, what are the amendments? So, the amendments to Article 1. So, therefore, it's the title has been replaced, so it's only applicable to human use. Yeah. So here again, the reference to human use, human procedures, the regulation, centralized procedure regulation, and national regulation. Yeah, so they basically here it's basically stating that everything relates to human medicines. Yeah. I think they've just They've just clarified the terminologies with regards to reference member state, and they've just talk about it as reference authority. Yeah. So introduction of wording is replaced. Um, Reference authority, the agency where at least one marketing authorization concerned is a centralized. Oh, that's the agency. Yeah. So these are the articles that have been updated as a result. I'm not going to go through Article 4, Article 5. Article 6A relates to the additional regulatory tools. Um, um, Supergrouping is Article 7A. So basically, all of the updates, it take me a long time to go through them, but all of the updates that I've discussed have been updated. All of the relevant articles have been updated, as has been Annex 3. Annex 3 has been updated, yeah? Annex 1, Annex 3. Yeah? So they've all been updated. So those are the um, delegated regulations that have updated the variation regulation. Right, so here in this particular slide, I want to talk about Annex 3. So we've gone through the delegated regulations that have updated the variation regulation, and we don't need to go through that again, but I just want to talk about Annex 3 just to signify, because we've done groupings of variations, and it's an important thing to understand where the changes apply and how they apply. So as you see, super grouping has been introduced, and Article 21 has been replaced and updated, as has Article 23. I haven't quite got there yet. Article 21. As has other articles as well. I think Article 10 has been updated as well. Article 21 has been updated as a result of this public health emergency. Article 22 remains the same, that's urgent safety restrictions, and Article 23 has also been updated as well. Yeah, so but what I want to just spend this particular slide on is Annex 3. So just quickly go through Annex 3. This is Annex 2. Here it is, Annex 3. Oh, look at that. So it hasn't really changed that much. It's just, let's just go through them. So one of the variations in the group is an extension of a marketing authorization. So you have
what does the law
your
require me
extension,
to do?
and then you have your variation. One of the variations in the group is a major variation of type 2. All other variations in the group are variations which are consequential to the major type 2. So I've done a previous presentation on this. You can have a look at that. One of the variations in the group is a minor variation of type 1b. All other variations in the group are minor variations which are consequential to this minor variation of type 1b. So basically those two are where you have a type 2 variation and you have consequential variations, that so maybe a type 2 variation and consequential type 1b, consequential type 1a. Another type variation, you have a type 1b variation, consequential type 1a's as a consequence of that type 1a, yeah? All the variations in the group relate solely to changes of administrative natures of the SMPC, of the product information, yeah? So if they're all administrative changes, nothing to do with pharmaceutical or clinical changes, you can group them. All the variations are changes to the active substance master file and vaccine antigen master file and plasma master file. So you can group those changes. Yeah. So the plasma master file holder or the vaccine antigen master file holder can submit a group variation to make those amendments. All the variations in the group relate to a project intended to improve the manufacturing process and the quality of the medicinal products concerned or its active substance, including administrative changes. Quite straightforward. All variations in the group are changes affecting the quality of the human pandemic influenza or coronavirus vaccine. So you know that I will be talking about this, but there is a specific variation for making updates, strain updates. But if you want to make additional changes to the quality of your human pandemic influenza or coronavirus vaccine, say you want to make quality changes and manufacturing changes, and there's a number of them, you can group them and you can use this as a justification. All variations in the group are changes to pharmacovigilance system. This is for Directive 2001/83/EC, so this is for national procedures. All variations in the group are consequential to an urgent safety restriction and submitted in accordance to Article 22. So this is Article 22 of the variation regulation. You know that you have to submit urgent safety restrictions within 15 days of notification. All variations in the group relate to implementation of a given class labeling. Yeah. So we have class labeling changes, recommendations as recommended by competent authorities or the agency, and we have to submit the variations and we can group them. All variations in the group are consequential to assessment of a given periodic safety update report. Yeah. So whenever you do your periodic safety update report, there may be outcomes to submit variations to update your product information. You submit those variations. You don't have to separate them. You can group them and you can put forward the periodic safety update report, the assessment report, and the recommendations as justification for your grouping. All variations in the group are consequential to a given post-authorization study conducted under the supervision of the holder. I think that's quite obvious. And last but by no means least, all variations in the group are consequential to a specific procedure or condition carried out pursuant of Article 14 of Regulation 726/2004 or Article 22 of Directive 2001/83/EC. So Article 14 of Regulation 726/2004, that relates to conditional marketing authorization for centrally authorized products. Yeah. So those marketing authorizations are granted because they are there to address an unmet medical need. So they will likely have incomplete data, and therefore they will be subjected to a specific obligation to be making updates and submitting those updates, and those updates can be submitted as a variation and they can be grouped. And then Article 22 of Directive 2001/83/EC is kind of the same thing but for national licenses. So basically they are approvals under exceptional circumstances. Yeah. And so when you've demonstrated during your application that you were unable to provide a complete data, say for example if you've got rare diseases, or maybe just unethical to continue a specific study, you might not necessarily have all the data that's required for marketing authorization, but because you're addressing an unmet need, they will grant that marketing authorization, and then under the conditions that you have this annual reassessment, maybe say, where you have to provide updated information for that, and you can provide that updated information as a grouped variation. Yeah. So that's Annex 3. Right, so let's talk about supergroupings, groupings, and work sharing. Right, so they've introduced this new supergrouping as Article 7A. So any Type 1A variations that are not exempted, yeah, they can be submitted as a supergrouping. So there are certain exemptions that apply, and those exemptions are something like a Type 1A immediate notification, where you have to submit within 2 weeks of implementation, or other types. I'll go through them in a second. Yeah, but as a result of this Article 7A, which has now been implemented, so it was implemented on 15th of January 2026, all the first Type 1A variations implemented as of that date should start a new cycle, unless they're listed, unless one of the listed annual update exemption applies to that variation. And they should start this new cycle where they are submitted, preferably within 9 months, 9 to 12 months from the implementation date. I think I read 9 to 12 months in some guidelines somewhere. I can't remember where I read it. So these are what the exemptions are. Type 1A immediate notification, the implementation dates of these have to be respected, and then you have to submit 14 days following the implementation. So say, for example, you're doing a group type 1B or group type 2 variation. You don't want to submit the type 1A separately to that. You want to submit them all at the same time because they'll be reviewed all at the same time. It makes sense to streamline that submission. And any type 1As that are part of the vaccine antigen master file or the plasma master file updates, these should really be, submitted separately. You don't want to group them because it becomes difficult to manage and reviewing and auditing, etc., etc. So you want to submit those separately. They're the exceptions. So for super grouping, you submit it as a single application for the same marketing authorization holder. Yeah, so these are type 1As variations, and they are the same type 1A variations for each marketing authorization. Yeah, if they're purely national, I think it is, and for both of them, I think for all of them actually, they have to, if you're submitting them for multiple marketing authorization, I don't know whether I did a diagram for this, but if you're submitting them for multiple marketing authorization, they have to be the same changes for all those multiple authorization, because the purpose is for efficiency. It makes sense to review all the changes that apply to all the different marketing authorization that are all identical, apart from things like specific issues like names of products or something like that has to be changed accordingly. That's according to each MA. But the same changes, the same type 1As are applicable to each MA, and you can submit them as a supergroup. So let's go through the guideline for supergrouping. So this guideline that's been updated as a result of the delegated regulation refers to Article 7A, and Article 7A relates to supergrouping, and this gives you the conditions for supergrouping. So it basically states that you can group in order to, it's in order to streamline and in order to make things efficient. You can group type 1A variations and submit it as one single application. They talk about the submission application as a notification. Yeah, so let's just read this. So in addition to the above, under Article 7A of the regulation, the variation regulation, a group of minor variations of type 1A may be submitted in a single notification for several marketing authorizations owned by the same holder, provided that the variations notified are identical for all marketing authorizations concerned. So this is supergrouping. So supergrouping is possible in the following cases. So the first one is one or several minor type 1As listed in chapter E and Q. So E is the administrative changes and Q is the quality changes. So the annex to this guideline lists all the categories, yeah, and it's separated it out as E, Q, C, and M, yeah. And when we're talking about type 1A variations that are in chapters E and Q, so those are administrative and quality changes, you can notify them all at the same time for several marketing authorizations, and those marketing authorizations must be granted in accordance with mutual recognition, decentralized or purely national in several member states. So purely national licenses are licenses where you just have the one MA. So it's not part of a DCP. It's not been harmonized as part of any referral procedure. It's just a national license that stands on its own. It's a pure national license. So you can group them and you can submit them to the several member states if you want, and you can submit it as one notification, yeah, and it has to be E and Q. Second is one or several minor variations of Type 1A are notified at the same time for several marketing authorizations granted in accordance with a mutual recognition decentralized procedure, and the reference member state is the same for those procedures. So you can submit a Type 1A variation that can be submitted at the same time for several MAs, yeah, that's granted for mutual recognition or decentralized procedures where the reference member state is the same for all of those in order to simplify it. Yeah. The third case is one or several minor type variations of Type 1A are notified at the same time for several marketing authorization granted in accordance with the centralized procedures. Yeah. So this is for the EMA where the CHMP may review or may um, file it away. And then the fourth one is one or several Type 1A notified at the same time for several MAs granted in accordance with mutual recognition, decentralized procedures, or purely national procedures in several member states, provided that the reference authority, i.e. the authority who's going to be performing the reviewing in consultance with the concerned authorities, agree to the proposed supergrouping. So you need to get their agreement, and that will be at the minimum 2 months in advance. Yeah? Yeah, and they're just a provision here. What's the word? I can't think of the word. A disclaimer. As experiences is acquired over time, additional cases may be identified in the future, in which case the appropriate operational guidance will be provided by on the agency and the CHMD websites. Now let's talk about grouping of variations. So this is an example of a simple grouped variation. So you submit one application where you've got 3 changes, and instead of submitting them as 3 single change, you group them together and you justify your grouping in accordance with Annex 3. So you have, in this example, a Type 1B, which is the main change, and then you have 2 consequential Type 1As, and instead of submitting them separately, you submit them as a group. So it's for the same marketing authorization. And the same what's the word I'm looking for? Approach applies to Type 2, where you have a main Type 2 variation and you have 2 consequential variations. One of them is Type 1B and the other one is a Type 1A. You submit them as one grouped application. You don't separate them out for the same marketing authorization. So this is a specific case for purely national procedures. So purely national procedures, if you have more than one MA, provided you have the same grouped changes, i.e. Type 1Bs, say, is your main change, and your consequential change is Type 1As as a result of the main change, which is Type 1B, and you have the justification according to Annex 3, you can submit them to the same MA, or sorry, the same competent authority. You can submit them to, so it's the same authority that's reviewing them as a grouped variation. So you have one application. So it's important to note that the changes have to be identical for each MA. The competent authority has to be the same competent authority. It's a purely national procedure, yeah, and you can submit it as one group. And the same the same approach applies to grouping of Type 2s for purely national procedures. You can submit the same changes for multiple licenses if they are identical. There's the same changes. So you have a main change and then consequential change. So in this case, the main changes are Type 2 and consequential changes are Type 1Bs and Type As, yeah? And you submit them for each marketing authorization. So it's purely national procedures. So this is just another update. Just want to go through the variation guidelines, and I just want to talk about the grouping of variations. So you can group Type 1As, you can group Type 1Bs, and you can group Type 2 variations, but under certain conditions. Certain things are considered to be supergrouping, certain things are considered to be grouping. So groupings of variations. So let's just double check. So this is submission of variations. So this is the variation guidelines. So grouping of variations, yeah. It's basically a single notification for the group, and it's got to comply with Annex 3. Type 1A can be grouped all together, and if your type 1As and type 1As type 1As can be grouped all together. If you're grouping type 1As, it should be a super grouping and it should be submitted annually, as we've discussed previously. Um, but you may, for whatever reason, if may not, maybe for tidying up, especially since this new variation has come into force, you might want to tidy up and submit a group um, reasonably soon before you start using the group super grouping process or procedures. So this is the way that you would do it. So you can submit a type 1A group, but super grouping we've already discussed. Type 1Bs you can group. Type 1Bs you can group them, but there's a difference between this and type and work sharing. So the work sharing relates to who's going to look at it, whereas the grouping relates to what's in that particular group. So holders may group under a single notification several minor variations of type 1B regarding the same marketing authorization, or one or more minor variations of type 1B with other minor variations regarding the same marketing authorization, yeah, provided that this corresponds to what's listed in Annex 3, yeah, or where this has been previously agreed by the reference member state, the national competent authority, or the agency. So in the case of medicinal products authorized under purely national procedures, remember we defined what purely national procedures were, the holder may group several minor variations of type 1B affecting several marketing authorization in a single member state, or in one or more minor variations of type 1B affecting several marketing authorizations in a single member state, yeah, provided that they're all the same marketing authorization concern, they're all the same variations and they're submitted at the same time to the same national competent authority. Yeah, so this you can group for purely national authorizations, yeah, but only for purely national authorizations for type 1Bs, provided that they're all the same. But for type 1Bs and type 2s, for decentralized procedures, mutual recognition procedures, and centrally authorized procedures, you can't group them if they're more than one marketing authorization to the same MA. It's to the same. You can't use the grouping route. You have to use the work sharing route. Yeah. So this applies to type 1Bs and it also applies to type 2s. So type 2s, again, this is where it aligns with Annex 3 of the variation regulation. So you can submit a single application, the submission of several major type 2 variations regarding the same marketing authorization. So that's one single. So if you've got more than one variation of type 2, you can submit it as a group, provided it aligns with Annex 3 requirements, or one or more major type 2 variation and other minor variations, again, so long as it aligns with Annex 3. That's the group, yeah? And you can submit it if it's purely national procedures. You can submit it from several marketing authorization, provided they're identical and it's going to the same MA and it's purely national marketing authorizations, and it's going to the same competent authority. For mutual recognition and decentralized procedures, if you want to do that, it becomes work sharing. Yeah, so that's grouping. So now let's move on to work sharing. So this is an example of a type 1B work sharing where you have either, so you have the same grouped change, type 1Bs, where is your main change, and type 1As are your consequential changes, and you're applying it across different marketing authorizations. So it makes sense to review them all together because they're the same changes. The only difference is maybe, say, for example, if you have your product information updates, will be the name of the product might be different. You might be changing the names, and the label leaflets might be different, but the actual changes, whether they be quality changes or clinical changes, the main changes um, and the consequential changes are identical for each MA. So you have your main change and your type 1B, and your consequential changes could be type 1As, different type 1As, but they are applied across the different marketing authorization, and it is the same marketing authorization holders. So you can submit this for DCP or MRPs, and I believe also national, but you have to get permission to do so, purely national procedures. But you can submit it across decentralized procedures and mutual recognition procedures, or you can submit it across centralized procedures. And in the centralized procedural case, that will be the agency who will make that submission. So that's the case of type 1B. And I just want to apply the same concept, the same approach for type 2 variation. So you can have a type 2 variation, which is your main variation, and you can have two consequential variations or more. I just got two here. And one of them can be a type 1B, the other one can be a type 1A, which is a consequential variation. And it is the same changes are applicable over different marketing authorizations. So you can work share, it makes sense, it's efficient to work share. And in this particular case, it's the same marketing authorization holders, the same grouped changes applicable across each marketing authorization. It's efficient to review them all as the same. And this is a work sharing. And in this particular context, it's a type 2. So in this next part, or this next part of the presentation, I just want to talk about how the guideline itself has changed. So I just want to run through this guideline so that it's clear what what the changes are, and so that it's easy and intuitive for you to be able to see what you want as soon as possible. So they've basically changed things, and they've given it different numbers and different letters and numbers. So just go for the top level. E, I think of it as editorial, yeah, so that's how I remember it's E and not A, and it stands for these are the administrative changes. Q, these are the quality changes, yeah? And then you've got C, which are the safety, efficacy, pharmacovigilance changes. I think of that as clinical changes. And M, I see these as master file updates. Yeah, so that's the overview, the top level overview. You have E, which is, I think of E as a memory aid, editorial. And these are all your administrative changes. So they're going to be E1, E2, E3, E4, and E5. Q stands for quality. So anything under Q will be your qualities. That will be your chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. Yeah. And then C, I think of that as clinical. So these will be your safety, efficacy, pharmacovigilance changes. And M, I see that as anything relating to your master file. So these will be your plasma master file and your vaccine antigen master file. Let's have a look at the administrative changes, yeah, and look at them. There are 5 of them in total, and I remember E is basically a memory aid for me is editorial, yeah. So your administrative changes, let's look at them. Number 1, changing the invented name of the finished product. So for centrally authorized medicinal products, this is always going to be a type 1A and it will always be an immediate notification, yeah, because that's an important change. You want to implement it quickly, but it's an editorial change, shouldn't require any review. And the reason why it doesn't require any review is based upon the condition. The check by the EMA on the acceptability of the new name has been finalized and was positive. Once you've got that, it's just an administrative update. All the things that are going to be changed are going to be the product information. So that's for centrally authorized procedures. Yeah. For nationally authorized medicinal products, you have that has to be reviewed. You have to go through some review by the competent authority, and that's the reason in my mind why it would be a type 1B. The documentations that you provide in this particular case will be the revised product information, but you will also probably provide other documentation to show that you've done some, some justification as to why you're choosing a specific name. Yeah. The next one is a type 1A, another immediate notification, because there's very little review. And this is changing the name of the active substance, excipient, medical device, part or packaging component. Yeah. And this has to be immediately implemented, and you need to make the submission within 2 weeks of implementation. And what are the conditions? So basically, it's the same active substance. It's not a different active substance. It's just the name that has changed. That's the condition. So the active substance, excipient, medical device, packaging component must remain unchanged. Yeah. And you want to have the required documentation. You will also have your product information needs to be updated, and you may also need to update the relevant sections of your dossier. Yeah, but it's a simple administrative change. Same for E3, which is another administrative change, and this is relating to the ATC code. This is a type 1A, it's not an immediate notification. So you can submit it between 9 and 12 months of implementation, and you just need to provide the relevant documents from the World Health Organization. And then E4, this is a change in name of various sites. Now there's two routes. It can be either a type 1A immediate notification, or it can be a type 1A, just that can be submitted between 9 and 12 months after implementation. Type 1A immediate notification is submitted within 2 weeks of implementation. Now, how do we make the choice? The choice that we make is based upon what is the manufacturer, or what is the entity that is changing. If it's the marketing authorization holder, it has to be a type 1A immediate notification. You have to tell them as quickly as possible. If it is a batch release site, yeah, anything to do with batch release activities, that's important, and that needs to be implemented, and it needs to be submitted as soon as possible. But anything else, so active substance, master file holder, storage site, packaging site, primary or secondary packaging site, that can be submitted as a type 1A. So that can be submitted as a super group if you want to submit as a super group, or a condition, any of the conditions, what do you call it, a grouping, a work sharing, however or an annual update. Yeah, but it can be submitted as a type 1A group. And then the last one is E5, and this is deletion of a manufacturing site. And that manufacturing site can be an active substance, intermediate product, finished product, whatever. If you're deleting a site, it's just a simple type 1A. You don't need to inform them because it has no impact on quality, safety, efficacy, and you just inform them. 12 months is the deadline. Obviously, 12 months is a type 1A, but usually submit it as part of an annual review, and usually the purpose is between 9 and 12 months following implementation. Right. So this is the hints and tips section of this document, and it's just to basically give you an idea with regards to how to navigate yourself around this. So E stands for administrative changes. I think of E for editorial. Q stands for quality changes. C stands for safety and efficacy, and pharmacovigilance changes. I think of C for clinical, and M I think of them as master files. So plasma master file and vaccine antigen master file. Yeah. So your editorial changes, these are your, sorry, your administrative changes. Um, Usually they're type 1As, but there are some type 1Bs there. Your quality changes, let's talk about how that's structured. Well, Q1 is your active substance, Q2 is your finished products, Q3 is your CEP, certificate of suitability, and TSC certificates and monographs. Q4 is your medical devices. Remember where I was talking about medical devices as being um, part of your pharmaceutical product. And Q5, these are changes to your marketing authorization as a result of, say, for example, your plasma master file updates or vaccine antigen master file updates or any quality referrals. Yeah. So that's how it's divided. The Q section, the quality section, is divided into five sections, starting with active substance and going all the way down to changes in marketing authorization resulting from other procedures. Yeah. Now, how are they set up? Well, you always start with your description, but in the case of active substance, you don't have a description because in theory, you shouldn't have a variation to change the description, the general information of your active substance. Because then it would be a different active substance and it would be a new marketing authorization application. It wouldn't be a variation. The exception to that rule is when you're changing the active substance, you're changing the protein, the amino acid proteins or the messenger RNAs for certain vaccines. So for influenza vaccine, for coronavirus vaccine, and for any other vaccine where there's a potential for urgent an emergency with regards to human health, then you would have to change, or for annual updates. And the reason why you're changing the active substance is because you're still treating the same condition, you're still treating the same indication, you're still using the same platform technologies. It's just that the virus changes. It's a normal consequence of viruses that they go through genetic drifts, they change, and those change may not necessarily impact on the ability of the vaccine to treat the condition, but it may. And in order to account for that, the marketing authorization holders or the developers have to change, have to modify the virus they have to modify the vaccine as the virus changes. So that's the only situation where you will have a change in the vaccine itself, in the the descriptive or the proteins of the vaccines, that you don't treat it as a new marketing authorization, you treat it as a variation. And that's why vaccines are treated differently to advanced therapy and medicinal products. So that's the description part. Then you have your manufacture part. Anything relating to manufacture, any changes relating to manufacturers is in A. Control of active substance, B. Container closure system, C. Stability, D. So this is the format. The format is your description, but you don't have one for active substance because in theory we don't change it. You have your manufacture, you have your control, you have your containers closure system, and you have the stability. And last, you have well, not last, but you have your additional regulatory tools. And the same approach is taken for finished products. You have your description, you have your manufacture, you have your control. And for your finished products, your control is divided into two parts. It's divided into control of your excipients and control of your finished product. You have your container closure system, then you have the stability, and then you have additional regulatory tools. And those additional regulatory tools we'll talk about, but they relate to the ICH post life cycle management. Things like, for example, design space, post-approval change management, etc. So those are your additional regulatory tools. And then you have a section for adventitious agents. So the safety evaluation for adventitious agents, that can be anything, but it's usually things like viral safety, but it can include other adventitious agents such as cellular adventitious agents. Yeah. And then next one is your certificate of suitability, TSC, medical devices, and changes to your marketing authorization from other regulatory procedures. So the other regulatory procedures, these are your plasma master file or your vaccine antigen master file updates. So when the vaccine antigen master file holder or the plasma master file holder updates their master file, or if you want to register a new master file, say you have a certificate of compliance, and that certificate of compliance it relates to another regulatory procedure. Yeah, so that regulatory procedure relates to the master file itself, but you don't actually do that as the holder. You're a marketing authorization, and your marketing authorization references that master file, and therefore any changes have to be reviewed separately on the master file and implemented via the certificate of conformance, and that's how you do it. And B referrals here for the quality section refers to referrals for specifically to quality. And that's it, and that's just how it's arranged, and that's how it's organized, and I hope it helps you to understand how to navigate yourself around this regulation. So let's go through the administrative changes. So let's look at the administrative changes. Let's look at all of them and just make sure we get our head around them and notice the commonalities between all of them. Yeah. So there are, I think it's five. Is it five? Yeah, there are five administrative changes. And what they've done is they've combined where possible and just made it more efficient and more streamlined. Yeah. So the first one, change in the invented name of the finished product. So for centrally authorized medicinal products, this is a type 1A immediate notification, and it's that reason because there's certain procedural um, routes and things that have to occur before you can change your name, the name of a centrally authorized medicinal product. For nationally authorized medicinal products, this has to be reviewed. Yeah, you can't just change the invented name and that's that. It has to undergo a review, and this is the reason why it's a type 1B in my opinion. So the conditions are: the check by the EMA on the acceptability of the new name has been finalized and was positive. And these are the documents: copy of the EMA letter of acceptance of the new name and revised product information. So obviously if you change your name, the documentation that's going to be impacted are obviously your product information. So it's only a type 1A if, say, for example, the conditions are not met. Sorry, it's only a type 1B if the conditions are not met or if there's documentation issue. However, you shouldn't be doing administrative changes like this for this particular one. You know, these are quite fundamental conditions and documentation. So for E2, change in name of the active substance excipient's medical device part or packaging component. So do you see these are administrative changes? Yeah, it's a type 1A because it's an administrative change. The active substance excipients device packaging components must remain unchanged, and these are the documentations that you have to provide. Yeah. And it's the same for this one, change in ATC code. Again, this has to be following a grant or amendment of the ATC code by the World Health Organization. It's a type 1A, and provided the conditions and the documentation has to always be, met in order for it to be type 1A. And then this one is change in name and address or address of marketing authorization holder, active substance master file holder, storage site or master of the master or working cell bank, manufacturing site for an active substance, intermediate finished product, primary or secondary packaging site, manufacturer responsible for batch release where quality control takes place, and or where supplier or packaging components of medical device, etc. These are all type 1As, yeah? It may be immediate notification, yeah? But they're all type 1As, yeah? And particularly where there's batch release, where anything is batch release, it's an immediate notification, yeah? For where the change in the name and address does not concern a manufacturer whose activities include batch release of the finished product, nor marketing authorization, it's a 1A, has to be submitted within 9 to 12 months, as you can submit that as part of your annual update. But Where it relates to a marketing authorization holder or batch release, these are type 1A's immediate notifications. They have to be submitted usually within 2 weeks of notification of implementation. Yeah. And then deletion, again, this is a type 1A. So type 1A editorial changes, so the each E which make, sorry, administrative changes. These are, well, administrative changes are usually type 1A unless there's a reason for review. And for national authorized medicinal products, you're going to have that review for change in name. But most of them, all of them, are type 1As. And type 1A in either immediate notification if it's affecting a marketing authorization holder or batch release site. But for everything else, in my opinion, it's annual updates. Yeah. So these are the editorial changes. There's 5 of them, and they are, generally speaking, do not impact on the quality of your material, safety and efficacy. They don't impact on that. Okay. So I just want to go through some of the changes on the Q section Q, the quality changes. So basically, the way that the codes have been referenced are different. Remember, it used to be A, B, C, D, I think E as well. Well, that's gone. And you've now had this E, Q, C, and M as the main starting letter. Yeah, so this is just describing how it's progressed. So instead of you having the old reference B1A2, it's now Q1A2, and so on and so forth. So these are the correct references for the new effective code, and the old reference and the old codes we don't use it. They're no longer applicable. So here are some of the categories that have changed. So that let's just quickly go through them. First one is the introduction of a new design space, and this is specific to the active substance. So it applies to manufacture, so the design space for your manufacturer, and it also applies for method operable design range, and that's relating to your analytical procedures. Or you can extend an extension of an approved design space for an active substance. So if one has already been um, applied, you can submit a variation to extend. So this is a brand new tool, and it's in alignment. Oh, I've got alignment with ICH M4Q revision updates. I think it's more in alignment with the ICH guidelines relating to life cycle management. That's how I see it. Not ICH M4Q also includes these updates as well, but ICH M4Q relates back to the ICH guidelines on the life cycle management, and that's where they both relate to. The same for finished products. So the Q2G1, this is introduction of a design space or an extension of an approved design space for the finished product. Yeah, so this is specific. So they've separated it out to make it easy for people. And again, as I say, this is a new tool. It's in alignment with the ICH M4Q, but it's also derived from the ICH guideline. Sorry about that. There's a mistake in that slide. It's derived from the ICH guideline that relates to the setup of an established conditions, and the design space is a result of that. Just thinking there. The other thing, I just noticed something as I've got it on this table. It doesn't say anything about method operable design range, because that's specifically to active substance. That's specifically to methods, analytical methods, analytical procedures. But it doesn't actually say in the description for analytical procedures. I'll have to check that on another point, another day, or after this conversation, after this presentation. The next change is the introduction of post-approval change management protocol for the active substance. So this was there before, but it wasn't separated out. Yeah. So here we've now separated out. We've got Q1E2 for the active substance, so the post-approval change management protocol for the active substance, and we've got Q2G2 for the finished product, introduction of post-approval change management protocol for the finished product. So it now gives you the options to make the amendments to a pre-approved design space, if you like, as a Type 1B, in addition to Type 2 for a new one. So if you want to have a new post-approval change management protocol, that will be a Type 2. If you want to have an amendment to the post-approval change management protocol, that would be a Type 1B. And I think they've also separated it out for active substances and finished product, if memory serves me correct. I think I did one for a finished product, but I don't think I've ever done one for an active substance, so I can't recall, but I'm pretty certain that there wasn't one. But in any case, we now have one for the active substance and we have one for the finished product. The other changes are Q1A5 and Q1A6, and this is as a result of Article 21 and 21A. So basically, any changes to the active substance of a seasonal pre-pandemic or pandemic vaccine against influenza can be submitted as a Type 2 variation. And Q1A6, any changes to the active substance to a vaccine against human coronavirus or other vaccines that has a potential to address public health emergency in the Union, can be submitted using these categories, yeah? And that's as a result of Article 21A. They've done a Q1V for medical device specific categories, and this is a completely new section, and this is with regards to the rise of combination products like pre-filled pens and inhalers. So the EMA addressed the specific code for integral or co-packaged devices, and this is to align with the medical device regulation. And the master file. So the master file updates plasma master files and vaccine antigen master files. So this is a new section, a category. And the other thing that they've done is they've removed variations to the terms of a marketing authorization for veterinary medicinal products. I just want to give another presentation. This is a slight detour on design space because it just made sense to me to explain myself. So I just want to talk about an example, yeah? So this particular example, imagine that we are manufacturing a CAR T cell therapy, yeah? And this is a closed system, and it's an automated CAR T cell manufacturing system, and it will be part of a modular manufacturing process, so part of a decentralized procedure, yeah? So this manufacturing process that is automated. Oh, I don't know whether this is a good example. I think I was just getting ahead of myself. But anyway, this manufacturing methods process, that's an automated process. It has, this is the process. So this is the procedure. And we want to introduce the design space. So this is the manufacturing process. You have, first step is leukapheresis and cell preparation. So you have your isolation and enrichment of your CD3 plus cells, or the specific CD4 plus and CD8 plus subsets of your peripheral blood and mononuclear cells. The second is your activation, T cell activation, and you use your magnetic beads that are coated with anti-CD3 or anti-CD28 monoclonal antibodies. And then you also have cytokines such as IL-2 or IL-7 or IL-15. So you want that activation. Third step is the introduction of your CAR gene, so the transduction. So you're going to incubate your vector with lentiviral vectors encoding the CAR genetic construct. So that's the transduction. The fourth stage is expansion. So you will expand in the bioreactor. The cells will be cultured in a culture media with some culture components in a closed system and grown for several days, maybe for several weeks. And then the fifth step is you want to harvest it. So you want to remove all the the contaminants, the waste, the cells. You want to harvest and you want to wash it. So that's bead removal, washing, and concentrating, and the formulating the product. And then your last step would be cryopreservation and sampling. Now I've got here DMSO as used as a cryopreservative. I'm not, I need to look into that. But it'll be stored in a gas phase liquid nitrogen refrigerator. So this automated system, yeah, it integrates the product sampling capabilities throughout the process. So you will have what's it called? Real-time testing. Yeah, real-time QC testing. Yeah, so this is basically what it is. We're just looking at the stages. That's a very, very quick overview. Now, I'm just trying to. This is just me taking, spitting on my finger and putting it up in the air and coming up with values. The purpose is not to look at the values. The purpose is to see the concept, and the concept is the design space. Yeah. So, in the case of the leukapheresis, yeah, it's the if you like, the specification for the incoming leukapheresis samples. You want to have that, you want to have a defined specification, because of the fact that the quality of your starting material will impact on your finished product, the quality of your finished product. And your design space can incorporate that. So your CD4 plus and your CD8 plus ratio should be within a specific range, i.e. between 0.5 and 1 for CD4 plus and CD8 plus, 2, 3 to 1. Yeah. Your activation. So the design space is if 70% of the cells, greater than 70% of the cells are activated within 24 to 48 hours, activated to express CD25. I think CD25 is the, this is expressed on activation, if memory serves me correctly, but I could be wrong about that. Your third design space for your CAR transduction is, I've got 80% efficiency if the average vector copy number is less than 5. So let me just have a look at my notes, because I put 20 to 80%, but the design space says I can have up to, I think, 80% efficiency if the vector copy numbers is less than 5. Yeah. So it's not just about guessing, but balancing the efficacy so that enough CAR T cells are transduced, but you have to make sure that you've got the safety with regards to the vector copy number, and you want to avoid that insertional mutagenesis. And then the fourth thing is about the cumulative population doubling versus viability. So you want to have limits for those, yeah. So and that the limit would be 80%. And the fifth relates to cryopreservation. I've just I just want to did I talk about the design space for cumulative population doubling? Say, for example, between 5 and 8, provided that the viability is greater than 80%. Yeah. And then the last stage would be cryopreservation, and it's just about the cooling rate. So rather than just saying below 130, you have to have a cooling rate. You have to have control over how you do this. So the design space proves that even if the freezing rate fluctuates slightly within that range, you're still going to get good recovery post thaw. So that's just an example of how you would introduce a design space. And really what you should have is a flow chart. You should have the manufacturing process and the design space standing in parallel. Oh, and I had another idea for a design space relating to quality control. So really this relates to method operable design range. So for example, if we have a HPLC method, not a HPLC test, and you want to arrange that design space around that particular method, these are the sorts of things that you could look at. You could look at the flow rate. So your set point would be 1 mil per mil, sorry, mil per minute, and your design space could be zero point 0.5 to 1.2 mil per minute. Yeah. Your column temperature, you might have your set point of 25 degrees, but you can also use 20 to 30 degrees. Your relative standard deviation for 5 consecutive injections could be less than 2%, but you can have up to 3%. And your column efficiency, your set point would be greater than 10,000 plates, but you can have anything greater than 7,500 plates, and your tailing factor, anything less than 1.8. So all of these, the justifications I've listed, but they're just an example of how you would set or how I think you could set your design space. Let's talk about master files. So there's a separate section for plasma master file and vaccine antigen master file updates. I kind of think of them as sort of organizational changes. That they do impact on, they only impact on really the certificates. So when a plasma master file is granted to the plasma master file holder, the marketing authorization holder then gets issued a certificate, and that marketing authorization holder can register a vaccine, the vaccine antigen master file dossier or the plasma master file dossier, using that certificate of conformance and using or is it certificate of compliance? I can't remember. And using the assessment reports, etc., all of the relative documentation to do that. Yeah. So they can. That's how it normally happens, and it can be a type 2 or type 1B variation or type 1A variation, depending upon what the change is. But you can also have, and that's part of what I just described there, would be part of the quality, the changes, the Q changes, yeah? But you can also have other changes to your plasma master file, and they've separated it out so that you can actually update the document separately. So this is, for example, changing the name and address of the certificate holder. This is a type 1A immediate notification. Change or transfer of the current plasma master file certificate holder to a new holder. So just before I just quickly go through that, I think these are okay. No, that's right. That's right. Change in the name of address of blood establishment or blood collection centres. Yeah, additional relocation of collection centre. So I tend to think of these as organisational, deletion or change of status. Um, so this is addition of a new blood establishment for collection of blood plasma not included in the plasma master file. This is a type 2, obviously, because it's a bit more there's a quality impact, quality, safety, efficacy impact, so it has to be properly assessed. Additional relocation, yeah. So I think of these changes mainly as organizational changes, addition of a new laboratory, changes in the establishment or center for storage, additional replacement of blood plasma tests. Now these are, these are sort of quality impacted. And these can be type 2 variations because they can impact on the variations, on the quality of your plasma. Change in inventory hold procedures. Yeah, addition of or replacement of blood containers. Yeah, these can be type 2 variations depending if they're not CE marked. Change in storage and transport. Introduction of new viral marker when this will have a significant impact on viral risk assessment. So this is a type 2 variation because it's a safety impacting change in plasma pool preparation. Yeah, that can be a type 1b, and change in the steps that would be taken if found retrospectively that donation should have been excluded from processing. That's a type 2 variation. So I kind of think of it really as kind of organizational. Real changes to your plasma master file or vaccine antigen master file may use the quality part of the variation guidelines, but this is just there to provide that streamline, easy to understand efficiency. Right. Not why I really did this. I just did this because I was trying to map out. I was getting into systems, system thinking, and taking a system approach. So you don't really need this because I think I've actually explained this better elsewhere. But here we go. Let's talk about vaccines. Right. So for this slide, I just, decided to put it in a, I don't know, not a flow chart, but a system sort of looking at it from a top level perspective, a bird's eye view. So basically, there is a public vaccination program as a result of some emergency in health, World Health Organization declaration. Yeah. And the pharmaceutical company will come up with a vaccine development program. They will register the vaccine. They will get a marketing authorization for the vaccine. And then, following some period of time, they may have to do a strain update because of the fact that the vaccine has mutated, the genetic material has mutated, and you might have different strains and you might have different serotypes even. So you might have a new amino acid sequence, or you might require a new messenger RNA sequence. Yeah. So this is going to be approved by the regulators before it's made available to the public for their public vaccination program. And what has happened is that the regulators have taken the approach to use a type 2 variation. I think it's actually Article 21 relating to COVID-19. I think it's Article 21 and Article 23 of the EU variation regulation guideline, variation regulation EU number 12234 2008. But this is the scenario, yeah, where we have a reason to change the manufacture that's not dictated by manufacturing optimization or supply and demand, but is dictated by the fact that the indication that we're trying to treat has changed, has modified, and it's modified because we're looking at a virus and we're not looking at something different. And that's why viruses in the EU are treated differently. Any change in the active substance, so for example, if you're changing the amino acid sequence or you're changing your messenger RNA, you really effectively got an active substance change, but it isn't. It's really because of the fact that you're changing as a result of a strain update. And the reason that you're doing that is because, you need to ensure that the public vaccination program is still effective, yeah? And the mechanism that the regulators of the European Commission has taken to do that is a type 2 variation. I hope this slide is up to date because I had to make some changes to it. I think it's a vaccine antigen master file that might be used for these types of changes. I haven't actually done one. But basically, your changing will be via a type 2 variation. I can't remember if it's Article 21 and 21A, but I do think it is that. And I think it's also Article 23 as well, has updated to account for this. You would require comparability data, comparative bridging data, basically, or bridging studies to look at safety and efficacy. You may be required to gather more data, more pharmacovigilance data post-approval. This will be implemented as either post-approval safety studies, or you might have to do a risk management plan. Your risk management plan will have to be updated. And your variation, I think this particular guideline that I've got here, influenza vaccine quality module, I think that relates to the actual marketing authorization quality aspects. But what we're looking at is we're looking at the type 2 variation, and that is Q1A5 for influenza and Q1A6 for coronavirus. So it's just I think I was just maybe getting carried away with myself and just sort of looking at this from a systems perspective. So I just want to talk about these two specific new introductions that have been introduced to the regulation. So it's Q1A5 and Q1A6. So these are relating to influenza vaccination and coronavirus or other vaccines, respectively. And they're basically there to account for these seasonal pre-pandemic or pandemic vaccine updates. So as a result of maybe strain updates, as a result of perhaps changes in the serotyping, you might need to change your sequence, your amino acid sequences. And this is progressed and managed as a type 2 variation. And that's why vaccines are treated differently to advanced therapy medicinal products, because the indication is quite clear. The indication isn't different. What is different is the fact that the virus itself is changing, and it's if you like to think of it as a prophylaxis. It's a prevention of a serious infection by preparing the body by producing to produce the relative adaptations in order to fight off the virus itself. Yeah, so the virus changes, and therefore the vaccine has to be adapted according to the virus, and this is the way that and means that we do it. So Q1A5 relates to the human influenza, and Q1A6 relates to coronavirus. And for the coronavirus, they've got two variations. They're both progressed as type 2s, but they also have the additional category for deletion of a serotype strain, antigen or coding sequence, or combination of these, for coronavirus vaccines or other vaccines that has the potential to address public health. And there are certain documentations to be supplied for those. You have to have basically had agreement with the agencies that is relevant, and a declaration that the serotype, strain, antigen or coding sequence is no longer appropriate in relation to the epidemiological evolution of the human virus. Yeah, and the revised product information has to address this. So these are the two variation categories that I wanted to talk about that are of interest regarding the updates. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is digitalisation and the use of AI with regard to regulation, and probably with regard to the use of AI in medicines, because it is already the case. So these are just my own opinions, but I do think that the application form and the introduction of ICH M4Q format, it introduces the use of digitalisation, and this is actually addressed in ICH M4Q, and the use of AI tools, specifically trained AI tools, I would say, in the regulatory evaluation process. So they're not going to just use the AI tools that are available to the public. They're going to train those AI tools specifically to review data, and they will use data that the European Medicines Agency have accumulated themselves. So it will be a much more, I don't know how to put it, a computer doing the thinking as opposed to human beings, with regards, and that can be very efficient. However, we do have to take into consideration issues with AI, and one of the issues is with AI is hallucination. I don't know whether or not what they've done, this is just my opinions and my thoughts, but they will still be looking at digitalizing things and using using technology to group information together, to locate information for that evaluation. And I do think that somewhere down the line, they need to be thinking about the use of AI in regards to evaluation. And obviously, that evaluation has to be checked by a human being, but these AIs will be specifically trained in order to do that, in my opinion. So this is going to be the evolution and where we're heading towards. With regards to variation, the selection of the correct category is fundamental because it allows you in to prioritize. If it's something like virus or vaccine updates, the agency has to prioritize what they want to review, what regulatory applications are important, and where they should best spend their resources, particularly in a human emergency. So, that's how I see it. That we would need to be where we will be going. So selection of the correct category is fundamental anyway for any variation application. You can get it rejected just because you haven't selected the correct category. So that is an important part, and it has always been. But particularly as we move towards digitalisation and the use of AI, the integration of these categories could be used, and that's in my opinion, could be used to prioritize the review of regulatory application. Again, this could be prioritization of vaccine antigen master files as a result of strain uptypes or serotype changes, and they can be higher priority reviews. So this is how we could be using AI, and we could be using technology to in the future. Pre-submission discussions with the European medicine agencies are imperative to ensure agreement with strategies and timelines for review. And this is not an issue, and we always do this anyway. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed my very long presentation. Please don't hesitate to leave a comment and a like if you enjoyed it. And I shall get back to some other stuff later. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.